Hello, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. I will be speaking on biblical cosmology and the reason of its importance in connection to the end times, and as well as why it's important to understand that which has been encoded and revealed in the book of Enoch over these many thousands of years.
From the time of my January 2015 Flat Earth Awakening to the August 2017 Globe versus Flat Earth debate between Dr. Stephen Pidgeon and myself, as hosted by Stephen and Yana Ben-Nun of Israeli News Live, held here in Atlanta, Georgia that year. I have published 3 books on the topic of biblical cosmology and the structure of the world. The first, Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch. The second, Firmament Vaulted Dome of the Earth. And the third, Paradise, Sides of the North, and Mount of the Congregation. Recognizing that something was awry with traditional academia, together with my son and daughter-in-law, Justin and Joy Garcia, we together as a family started sacredwordpublishing.com as a way to bring forth for public consideration many ancient manuscripts and texts. With the release of my 12th book, The Firmament Vaulted Dome of the Earth, in the year 2016, we posted on our website an $8,250 challenge, payable to anybody that could confirm in 2 scientifically repeatable and verifiable experiments that either the Earth was moving or that it possessed measurable curvature. A perfect example of just such a proof is the Bedford Level experiment conducted in 1838 by Samuel Burley Robotham, a mathematician, scientist, author, and public lecturer. Robotham used the Pythagorean theorem to calculate in formula the Earth's curvature. The Pythagorean theorem dictates that the sum of the square of adjacent and opposite sides equals the square of the hypotenuse in a right triangle. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Considering the natural properties and physics of water, it's difficult to conceive how the Earth's oceans could possibly adhere to a ball, as water will always drip, leak out, or escape from any form which does not contain it, and finding its low point will pull together in a horizontal level, as seen in the structure of a pond, lake, or ocean. To test this hypothesis, Robotham conducted the Bedford Level experiment. Tying a flag to the mast of a boat, he sent it 6 miles across the Stillwater Canal near his home, and using a telescope deemed that there was no change in movement to its height. Given there should exist 24 feet of total curvature at 6 miles, the top of the mast should have been some 11 feet below his line of sight. But recognizing that there was neither 11 feet or even a single inch of deviation to his observations, Robotham concluded that there was no rotundity to the Earth and that it was in fact a plane. In 1849, under the pseudonym Parallax, he published his findings in a book called Zetetic Astronomy. If the Earth is a globe and is 25,000 English statute miles in circumference, the surface of all standing water must have a certain degree of convexity. Every part must be an arc of a circle. From the summit of any such arc there will exist a curvature or declination of 8 inches in the first statute mile. In the second mile the fall will be 32 inches. In the third mile 72 inches or 6 feet. After the first few miles the curvature would be so great that no difficulty could exist in detecting either its actual existence or its proportion. In the country of Cambridge, there's an artificial river or canal called the Old Bedford. It is upwards of 20 miles in length and passes in a straight line through that part of the old fens called Bedford Level. The water is nearly stationary, often completely so, and throughout its entire length has no interruption from locks or water gates of any kind, so that it is in every respect well adapted for ascertaining whether any or what amount of convexity really exists. Simplifying the formula for determining curvature to 8 inches per mile inversely squared to the distance, he was able to calculate and showed in a table the rate of curvature as it crosses 10 miles in inches and feet. That being said, some of you know that from May to December of 2019 of last year, I was forced to endure a series of 3 very public and seemingly notable trials when a Microsoft software developer named William Thompson filed suit against me in the Barrow County Magistrate Court for the sum of $15,000. What you may not know about these proceedings is they were connected to a contest held by Sacredwood Publishing from August of 2016 until November of 2017, which Robbie Davidson, Mark Sargent, and myself thought would be a great way to promote the Raleigh, North Carolina First Annual Flat Earth Convention. Numerous participants applied to the contest, but none produced a single, much less 2 real-world verifiable and repeatable experiments which could either confirm the rate of curvature or that the Earth was indeed moving at any rate of speed. Many were shocked when I disclosed that the prize money was still available for reward. Few, if any, had ever second-guessed their heliocentric indoctrination or belief in our so-called solar system. All of them believed it would be relatively easy to affirm the Earth as a ball until they started to consider how to, in scientific experimentation, test positively such notion. In sharing conversation with them, I directed my rebuttal, as I had during last year's court proceedings, to the undeniable fact that one can easily see monuments, islands, cityscapes, and lighthouses beyond what should be possible should the Earth truly be a spheroid. Holding numerous conversations with these individuals from all across the world about their so-called evidentiary proofs, I realized that most people, especially science-minded academic professionals, they just assumed that the question of the Earth's shape had previously already been settled in historical times. Likewise, with the existence of NASA's Apollo space program, they believe that the images of the blue marble are irrefutable evidence that there's nothing more to deliberate. And yet, as so many have shown, their images, including the famous ones of the Earth from space, are all Photoshop composites and digital renderings, and even the size and shapes and colors of the oceans and the continents of the Earth are all different according to which image you are looking at. An actual photo of the Earth from space does not exist, and as shown by individuals well versed in using Photoshop as a tool, like our good friend Rob Skiba, the image of the Earthrise while an astronaut is planting a flag on the moon. This famous image was found to be staged, and the Earth doctored into the background. Many have verified discrepancies.
But over the last few years, I've become more than convinced that we never went to the moon. And this belief was only further solidified the more I began to analyze the pictures allegedly shot on the moon. I have to say, I don't think they counted on Photoshop. Because you can take these images into image processing software such as Photoshop, adjust the contrast, and see stuff like this. Strange masks and rectangular boxes around the Earth. I even found one on the Apollo 17 mission itself, right here on the NASA website, Scientists on the Moon. click on this picture right here. Supposedly the same mission, same guys that took the picture, the most famous picture of our Earth. I'm going to do save image as, and let's see, Apollo Moon. Let's call it Apollo Moon 17. And I'm going to open that in Photoshop. Okay, I'm going to zoom in on the Earth. I'm going to go to Image, Adjust, Levels, and I'm going to bring the levels up. Uh-oh. Why is there a square box around the Earth allegedly taken from the scientists on the moon in Apollo 17? And people wonder why I don't trust NASA. That's why I don't trust NASA.
We have verified discrepancies in image after image from NASA archives. The most important piece of evidence confirming NASA's hoax is contained in Bart Seibrel's documentary Something Funny Happened on the Way to the Moon. In it, he shares a video he received from the Freedom of Information Act, which shows that the Apollo 11 missions were trying to stage the rotundity of the Earth, and this was done by the two famous astronauts, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. When it comes to the facts, I will stick to real-world evidence. Knowing without a doubt that curvature was non-existent, I implored all of the challengers to conduct a simple, cheap, and easy to reproduce laser test. The few that did were mind-blown, and if able to open themselves up to new possibility, like all of us initially when forced to face that the Copernican heliocentric model for understanding the world is a huge monumental lie. As I testified in court, when it comes to real-world evidence, the actual process of determining the truth of this matter is as simple as conducting a curvature test, and yet so few are willing to do so, choosing to remain staunch supporters of the impossible, as was the case with William Thomson. He submitted as evidence for our competition 2 software personally designed programs. The first was said to, number 1, calculate theoretically how much curvature existed between 2 towers of an expansion bridge. And number 2, the second program, would supposedly calculate the differences in curvature of an individual watching sunset from a certain floor of a skyscraper as opposed to what would be seen from ground level. Arguing over semantics and whether his submissions were actual scientific proofs, I pointed out to him that developing software programs based upon a heliocentric mindset was tantamount to belief that water can stick to a globe and that oceans can arc in shape over wide expanses. And while scientists believe that gravity can hold in place on the Earth millions of gallons of water, while at the same time allowing butterflies and birds to fly freely in opposition to its force, is conjecture, lies built upon lies with no basis in reality. The simple fact of the matter is that science, when conducted in truthful experiment, disqualifies such belief and exposes heliocentricism as a lie. My refusal to pay out the $8,250 reward led to a May 2, 2019 decision by Thomson to file suit against me. He claimed, quote, Zen Garcia ran an online contest that I won to produce 2 proofs that the Earth is a rotating spheroid. I met all the criteria to win the contest, and he did not pay, end quote. I, however, shared real-world, scientific, verifiable proofs that anybody can do and confirm for themselves. The first example shows that New York State's Statue of Liberty, standing 326 feet above sea level, can be seen on a clear day from as far as 60 miles away. Applying the formula for determining the rate of curvature on a globe or a spherical Earth, such appearance should be impossible, given that there should be 2,072 feet of curvature between Lady Liberty and the observer at that distance. The second example, photographer Joshua Nowicki a few years ago caused an enormous controversy. By standing on the shores of Lake Michigan, he was able to snap a picture of the Chicago skyline from 50 plus miles away. His panoramic view of the city became a spectacle, given it should be impossible at that distance to visually see even the antenna that sits on top of the 108-story Willis Tower, also called the Sears Tower. Rising to 1,451 feet in height, this building should have been completely hidden by the 1,666.67 feet of curvature, which should have been obstructive between the photographer and the skyline. Even just seeing the antenna on top of the tallest building should have been structurally impossible, and yet Nowicki was able to capture and visibly portray the entire length of Chicago's panoramic cityscape. The third example is based upon the fact that residents of the island of Oahu in Hawaii all attest to being able to regularly view from their homeland the island of Kauai, which is in excess of 90 miles distant from their island. Even at 200 feet of elevation, there should be over 5,400 feet or nearly a mile of curvature dividing those islands from one another, making visibility of them from one another at any time, under any condition, impossibility. Yet the Hawaiian natives all will avow under oath as to their ability to see the other islands at such distance and range on regular occurrence. I will include one other verifiable, though mostly unknown fact as confirmation and partial reason for why I held the contest that I did. This truth has to do with the fact that structural engineers, surveyors, and architects, when building bridges, railroads, and canals, never take into consideration or factor into their projects the supposed curvature of the earth. One can read the rebuttals submitted by me in the first case for several pages of testimony and evidence which attest to this non-deniable fact. Built over and across hundreds and sometimes thousands of miles, the surface tracks and waterways are always cut, positioned, and laid out as close to a horizontal level as possible. Any deviation with regard to the inclination or declination is managed with great consideration, except when entering or exiting a bridge. There is no allowance for curvature when calculating or designing into Blue Plan these kinds of structures which are used for long-distance travel. The reason why we chose to close this competition following the November conference was not because I was concerned somebody would succeed in winning the prize money, but simply did not have the time to waste on all the hours of back and forth bantering necessary to educate the challengers when it comes to the reality of this situation. Busy with multiple other projects, I just did not have the time to dedicate to holding the conversations necessary to refute all these challengers' submissions. Thompson's case against me was decided on June 11, 2019, before Magistrate Court Judge the Honorable Jamie Crow, who, after hearing our arguments, ruled in my behalf, declaring that when it came to the contest, Thompson simply, in her opinion, had not submitted reasonable proof to warrant his winning the prize money. To my knowledge, this was the first time in American history that the question of whether the earth is a flat plane or a round globe was heard, reviewed, and decided upon by a judge in a court of law. One can download the case file by submitting a request to the Barrow County Clerk using the name of the case, 2019-MD-1104, to get access to the material evidence preserved by the court. Disgruntled with the judge's decision, Thompson, on the very following day, the 12th of June, 2019, appealed the decision and, charging me with perjury, accused me of incontrovertibly lying in court in jaw-dropping falsehoods that are demonstrably untrue. Lying in a sworn testimony is perjury and an offense. He played on the emotion of the judge, playing victim in a grotesque theater. I am owed $15,000, said Thompson. I was informed of these charges by a sheriff's deputy and decided then to countersue in the amount of $5,000. Another date was set for an entirely new deliberation. This time the proceedings would take place before the Superior Court Judge, Curie Mingledorf. At that trial, the judge decided to defer the case to December 6th of 2019, as I would not be in town the month of November, citing my participation in the 3rd Annual Dallas Flat Earth Conference.
All right, Zen, how'd it go? What happened?
All right, just to give everybody an update, the judge, because we had 2 cases pending, the second case he had filed against me was for perjury and for lying before the court, which was absolutely not true. That case was thrown out by the magistrate court judge Crow before it was even heard. And so now, coming for the 3rd case, which was going to be basically a retrial of all the facts of the first case, that judge has decided to push this case so that we can merge and finalize without me having to come back here again, which is what Thompson wanted to do, that we can argue both the facts of the case as well as his claim that I perjured myself. And so hopefully we can do one more round of litigation and it be completed, finished, and done. But what is kind of funny is that coming from Mississippi, he now has to, reschedule and buy plane tickets and rental car and hotel and all that. So it's much more of an inconvenience for him. But if he chooses to continue down this path, karma. Long story short, the week before we were to appear before the Superior Court Judge, I received a letter on December 3rd, 2019, from Thompson's law firm that the case against me, civil action number 19-CV-000866-M, had been dismissed without prejudice. The ongoing debate of whether Thompson verified the Earth a spheroid and deserving reward was over, and the truth of biblical cosmology upheld in an American court, setting precedents for any future litigation on this matter.
The reason I share this news is because it is my belief that understanding biblical cosmology as revealed by the Bible and the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries contained in the book of Enoch, that this information will be of utmost importance for us, the fig tree and end times generation. And even though most people consider the topic ludicrous, nonsensical, and or lunatic fringe, I can now think of no greater danger or threat to our Christian faith than scientism and its approved educational indoctrination. When it comes to twisting and turning the minds of all people everywhere from recognizing the presence of God in every aspect of His creation, to acceptance that life evolved from random chaos without need of intelligent designer, there is no greater opposition. The most highly respected, brilliant minds of the world believe now that all creatures found origin in some ancient primordial soup and that our ancestors had once swung from the trees. In this day and age it is being proposed, and many alternative truth researchers now declare this as their opinion, that the Anunnaki god Enki seeded modern-day humanity. This premise, wildly popular, is being propagated by
the History Channel's Ancient Aliens series. The Bible expressly warns us of the rise and embrace of this mindset, declaring that at the last times, with the coming reign of the Antichrist, the strong delusion that an alien God created us long ago and is returning to save us from ourselves, that this fantasy would be allowed by God because people at that time have no love of the truth. It is said that even the very elect would be swept up in this way of thinking and dissuaded from accepting or even believing in the true God and the prophetic divine inerrancy of the Bible as His Word. The Bible also foreshadows the iniquity of this time and the people's complete disregard for accountability. There would be no regard or concern for a future judgment or afterlife where people reap what they sow. It portends the lawlessness that is now scourging the world like wildfire, and a time where people, in doing what they wish and in the manner that they want, without regard for repercussion, act exactly in the manner stated by the satanic motto of "Do what thou wilt" shall be the whole of the law. A great falling away there would be in these times, no reason to uphold or extend courtesy, respect, goodwill, or loving kindness to one's fellow, neither the creatures living amongst us or even the natural world of which we are dependent. Belief in God is mostly eradicated from societal relationships. Prayer has been removed from daily routine. Most do not confess a moment of gratitude to the Most High God or ask for blessing when partaking of the bounty in which He so abundantly provided all of us when it comes to food, drink, the chance to marry, take on a spouse, have children, or even the simple things of sleep and dreams. For most, there is no ceremonial recognition or ritualized respect given to God for the blessing of any existential moment. Truly, we live in the days when people can gather like a pack of wolves openly and plainly before law enforcement, and then rioting on the streets, destroy others' properties, pilfering their goods to mitigate in a single tactless night the lifelong dreams and efforts of entire communities across the nations of the world. Under the guise of peaceful protest,
a few rogue elements can lead an entire unified movement to victimize innocent bystanders, and trampling upon others' lives, lead those who otherwise would not have acted of their own accord to participate in the rape, pillage, plunder, and even murder of those they've never even known prior. The world is on fire, as purposely and perfectly orchestrated by the New World Order elites who wrote in the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, published in 1903. Today, I may tell you that our goal is now only a few steps off. There remains a small space to cross, and the whole long path we have trodden is ready now to close its cycle of the symbolic snake, by which we symbolize our people. When this ring closes, all the states of the world will be locked in its coil as in a powerful vice. This hatred will be still further magnified by the effects of an economic crisis, which will stop dealing on the exchanges and bring industry to a standstill. We shall create by all the secret subterranean methods open to us, and with the aid of gold, which is all in our hands, a universal economic crisis, whereby we shall throw upon the streets whole mobs of workers simultaneously in all the countries of the world. These mobs will rush delightedly to shed the blood of those whom, in the simplicity of their ignorance, they have envied from their cradles, and whose property they will then be able to loot. Ours they will not touch, because the moment of attack will be known to us, and we shall take measures to protect our own. We have been leading the people from one disenchantment to another, so that in the end they should turn also from us in favor of that king despot of the blood of Zion, whom we are preparing for the world. The globalist banksters have since that time hidden in plain sight, as encoded onto our currency, two of their most important principles. Number one, on the frontal seal, an American bald eagle holding an olive branch, the symbol of peace, and behind the national shield, in the eagle's beak on a held ribbon, in 13 letters, the motto, E pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one, which is exactly what they are trying to do in creating world government through the United Nations. On the reverse of the seal, a pyramid standing for, so they say, permanence and strength, with 1776 in Roman numerals across its base. Another 13-letter motto, Annuit coeptus, meaning he has favored our undertakings, which is exactly what Satan Lucifer has done in supporting the New World Order. Emphasizing the motto below of Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means a new world order of the ages, which in truth is nothing new at all, but dates back to Atlantean times and the fall of Lucifer and the third of the angels that rebelled with him in insurgency against the Most High. Another very interesting concept which the elites abide by is the principle of order out of chaos. Every republic passes through several stages. The first of these is comprised in the early days of mad raging by the blind mob, tossed hither and thither, right and left. The second is demagogy, from which is born anarchy, and that leads inevitably to despotism. Not any longer legal and overt, and therefore responsible despotism, but to unseen and secretly hidden, yet nevertheless sensibly felt despotism in the hands of some secret organization or other, whose acts are the more unscrupulous inasmuch as it works behind a screen, behind the backs of all sorts of agents, the changing of whom not only does not injuriously affect but actually aids the secret force by saving it, thanks to continual changes, from the necessity of expanding its resources on the rewarding of long service. Who and what is in a position to overthrow an invisible force? And this is precisely what our force is. Gentile masonry blindly serves as a screen for us and our objects. But the plan of action of our force, even its very abiding place, remains for the whole people an unknown mystery. But even freedom might be harmless and have its place in the state economy, without injury to the well-being of the peoples, if it rested upon the foundation of faith in God, upon the brotherhood of humanity, unconnected with the conception of equality, which is negative by the very laws of creation. For they have established subordination. With such a faith as this, a people might be governed by a wardship of parishes, and would walk contentedly and humbly under the guiding hand of its spiritual pastor, submitting to the dispositions of God upon earth. This is the reason why it is indispensable for us to undermine all faith and to tear out the mind of the Goyim, the very principle of the Godhead and the Spirit, and to put in its place arithmetical calculations and material needs, the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. Is not scientism this exact declared for replacement? It is my opinion that yes, and so the motive for the endgame must be considered. Why would this secret force, of which President Woodrow Wilson said, "Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere, so organized, so subtle, so watchful and so interlocked, so complete and so pervasive, that they better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." Woodrow Wilson, The New Freedom, 1913. This same secret force was spoken about by John F. Kennedy in a speech prior to his murder and assassination.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Woodrow Wilson also stated in 1913, after passing the Federal Reserve and signing it into law, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the voice of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. We live now in a time when the sunshine of a brave new world rises upon all lands. The governments of the world run by state criminality, political bandits and persecution of the weak. This is now a dog-eat-dog world, where few hear the voice of conscience dwelling within them, the voice of reason calling out from our inner core, struggles to guide all of us individually and collectively to a direction where we abide by the principle of doing good for goodness sake. The day has now dawned upon us when the majority of the people, disconnected from the words of the prophets and the warnings of their Maker, like Adam and Eve in believing the words of the dragon, have assumed the aspiration that they can achieve to be God themselves, and that there is no reason to follow the commandment or the advice of a Creator in whose image we are said to have been formed. Out of this thinking, like a phoenix, will arise a false doctrine, one being perpetuated even now, that the fallen dragon-like angels, which were once exiled from the heavens sometime in our distant past, that these extraterrestrial entities, these supernatural impostors, are the true creators of humanity, and that they are returning now at the end of days in order to save us from destroying ourselves. This simulation was portrayed in the sci-fi miniseries Childhood End, where the overlords of an ancient race return to the earth to end the violence, sickness, starvation, and lack amongst the children of humanity. They did all these things hiding behind a mask for 50 years before revealing their true nature and stepping out on the stage as devils, hoofed and horned like Satan of old. No marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. All of the signs point to this being the endgame of the New World Order, and that the rise to power of their despot king. These things must be fulfilled before the return of the true Messiah, and thus the extreme importance of understanding that we do not live in an infinite, ever-expanding universe where every star is an individual sun, and every sun holds the possibility of advanced life, having spun off their own planetary systems in orbit around them. One must understand that the miracle of life could never have evolved randomly out of chaos, because some planet happened to be properly distanced in what the modern astrophysicists, the neoteric priests of Baal, call the Goldilocks zone. It's with such mindset that I'm going to present to you the key for unlocking an age-old mystery which, encoded into the Book of Enoch for thousands of years, has, at least for the last half a millennia, been lost to understanding and interpretation. This skeleton key, when understood, will unlock the riddle of why scriptures affirm that the earth is a fixed, stationary, unmoving plane, and that the sun, moon, planets, wandering stars, and constellations all move in revolution around the North Star Polaris and not that of the sun. Of heaven, in heaven, and in the world, that they might rule in the face of the sky, and appearing over the earth become conductors of the days and nights, the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the ministers of heaven, which make their circuit with all the chariots of heaven, said Enoch in chapter 74, verses 8 and 9. As I have shown in my trilogy on this topic, there is not one passage in either the Bible or the Book of Enoch which attributes motion to the earth, and yet there are many passages which declare otherwise. The key for unlocking the riddle of true cosmology, as explained to Enoch by the angel Uriel, are these two verses. Enoch 71:8. The sun sets in heaven, and returning by the north to proceed towards the east, is conducted so as to enter by that gate and illuminate the face of heaven. In Enoch chapter 77, verse 4, they enter into the western gate, circuit by the north, and through the eastern gate go forth over the face of heaven. Visualizing the description of this east to west and then north to east motion on the backdrop of the earth as displayed on the United Nations flag, one can clearly see that what Enoch is describing is a circle. Grasping this concept, one can then interpret the motions attributed to the luminaries through the six gates of heaven as they transit back and forth between the tropics of Capricorn and Cancer. In this model, night and day are determined by the sun's clockwise revolution, not the earth's spin. Sunrise occurring when the day star in the morning enters a person's area and field of illumination, crossing southern skies in an arc over the course of day, and reaching the vanishing point. We perceive this phenomena as sunset, and yet the sun remains at the same altitude in the sky, and now crossing northward illuminates the opposite side of the earth's plane, where those living in these regions witness sunrise upon its entrance over their lands for the break of day. circling once in a 24-hour period. It is for this reason that every region of the world following sunset experiences night, as the sun travels in circularity to the other side of the world, until returning across the north in arc arrives in the east in appearance for new morning and new day. The sun's motion through the six gates of heaven create the analuma in heavenly pattern. Enoch begins the explanation of its movements as the sun moves away from its placement above the equator for the vernal equinox, until reaching the Tropic of Cancer and crossing through the sixth gate of heaven for the summer solstice. The world experiences the longest day of the year. Reversing course, the sun then begins moving daily back towards the equator until arriving directly above for the autumnal equinox. Night and day are divided equally. Crossing the equator, the sun moves towards the first gate and the Tropic of Capricorn for the winter solstice and longest night of the year. And then, reversing course, it moves back towards the equator for the vernal equinox and the beginning of a new year. While humanity has been brainwashed to accept the Copernican heliocentric model for understanding world, the knowledge that the earth remains fixed and stationary while all the stellar luminaries visible at night, together with the day star sun, all move in circularity around the North Star Polaris, is a secret which has been daily witnessed by all those that live here upon the earth for thousands of years. In George Orwell's 1984 it says, "But the world itself is only a speck of dust, and man is tiny, helpless. How long has he been in existence? For millions of years the earth was uninhabited." Nonsense. The earth is as old as we are, no older. How could it be older? Nothing exists except through human consciousness. But the rocks are full of bones of extinct animals, mammoths and mastodons and enormous reptiles, which lived here long before man was ever heard of. Have you ever seen these bones, Winston? Of course not. 19th century biologists invented them. Before man there was nothing. After man, if he could come to an end, there would be nothing. Outside man, there is nothing. But the whole universe is outside of us. Look at the stars. Some of them are 1,000,000 light years away. They are out of our reach forever. What are the stars? Said O'Brien, indifferently. They are bits of fire, a few kilometers away. We could reach them if we wanted to, or we could blot them out. The earth is the center of the universe. The sun and the stars go round it. For certain purposes, of course, that is not true. When we navigate the ocean or when we predict an eclipse, we often find it convenient to assume the earth goes round the sun and that the stars are millions upon millions of kilometers away. But what of it? Do you suppose it is beyond us to create a dual system of astronomy? The stars can be near or distant, according as we need them. Do you suppose our mathematicians are unequal to that? Have you forgotten doublethink? Filtering what we visibly perceive. Satan has all the world, trapped in a mindset which diverts the preeminence of the earth and its people as the singular focus and narrow-minded concern of our Creator, to belief that our world and its creatures are nothing more than a tiny speck of dust in the grand matrix of an ever-expanding cosmos. Establishing pagan sun-based religions and worship and a false trinity, he has in this manner succeeded in exalting his throne above the stars and the clouds of God, as declared in Isaiah chapter 14, and he is now reaping the reverence and benefit of such idolatry. He has truly, temporarily achieved his desire of being like the Most High. 3 years ago, a gifted Vatican translator and Italian scholar of linguistic and religious studies, Mario Biglino, in tutelage to Edizioni San Paolo of the Vatican Publishing House, began doing public broadcasts where he claims that the original Hebrew, Greek, and Latin translations of the Old Testament Bible reveal that extraterrestrials are involved in the origins of Homo sapiens as a species, and that we were bred from their genetics, and that other primates already here upon the earth were used in the mix. He and his cohorts are advancing the Sumerian ideology that the Anunnaki artificially crafted us to mine gold for them, and that we are in essence nothing more than a manufactured slave race. Morrow believes that only with such knowledge can one truly understand the ancient writer's message and decipher the true and profound understanding expressed by them about humanity. He also claims that most of the Jewish and Vatican scholars accept and have come to understand history in this manner. In speaking about the interviews done by him, he states, quote, "This mind-bending conversation looks into the ancient text from a very different paradigm than what most have seen or believe." Of course, this interpretation, no matter what ultimately is found to be the truth, does not negate the reality or possibility that God or an ultimate creator exists. It also does not mean that a one-world religion is needed or imminent. Very interesting that he would mention a one-world religion in parallel with this ideology. It's also very interesting to me that this information aligns very much with a book released by Tom Horn and Chris Putnam in 2012 called Exo Vaticana, cited at the top of its webpage this ominous warning. Christians will not immediately need to renounce their faith in God simply on the basis of the reception of this new unexpected information of a religious character from extraterrestrial civilizations. However, once the religious content originating from outside the earth has been verified, they will have to conduct a rereading of the gospel inclusive of this new data. And this comes forth from Vatican astronomer, the eminent theologian and full professor of fundamental theology at the Pontificia Università del Santa Croce in Rome, Father Giuseppe Tanzelli Nitti. While the world is being prepped for the strong delusion, Yahuwah is tearing down this house of cards by drawing true believers like yourself to interest in biblical cosmology, so that in a time when the world begins to bend the knee to alien gods and accepting the Antichrist as a false Messiah and Savior, we will see clearly through the deception and renounce the Antichrist as a deceiver, and in whatever way possible expose him as an impostor. Hopefully, many of you will join me in sounding the trumpet of God's truth in Revelation, as so many here at the 2020 Take on the World Conference are doing. I will conclude this presentation by citing a few other ancient sources which also verify Enoch's secret declarations. These accounts stand undoubtedly as confirming witness to his declarations of the sun's motion through the 6 gates of heaven, and fit perfectly into the pattern of the analemma described as being formed in the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. From the book 50 Reasons, Copernicus or the Bible. The sun moves in a spiral line or winding like a screw around the earth, southward from June till December and northward from December till June. He therefore daily stays behind the stars about 4 minutes, thus marching through all the stars within a year. The Hebrew word for sun is shemesh, and he is called thus because of his swift motion. The verb shamash means to run hastily, to move very fast. Now, since all Scripture is given by inspiration of God, and holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Ghost, since even the single words were inspired by God, when things also we speak not in words, but which man's wisdom teacheth, but which the Holy Ghost teacheth, must not the Creator himself be anti-Copernican? He undoubtedly is. Then ponder this fact. Interesting that the sun, Shamash, receives its name from the idea of its moving swiftly. Solomon in the Targum version of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verses 3 through 6, also correctly conveys this concept. And whereas in the King James Version, verse number 6 is attributed to the wind, the sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he arose. The wind goeth toward the south, and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to his circuits. In the Targum version of Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 6, that motion is continued and attributed to the sun. The sun rises by day from the east side, and the sun sets on the west side at night, and it glides into its place going by the path of the deep, and it rises the next day from the place where it rose there yesterday. Verse 6, it goes along the whole south side by day, and returns to the north side by the path of the deep. Round and round it goes to the wind of the northern side at the period of Nisan and Tammuz, the vernal equinox and summer solstice, and on its circuit it returns to the wind of the southern side at the period of Tishri and Tibet, the autumnal equinox and the winter solstice. It goes out from the eastern lattices at dawn and enters through the western lattices in the evening. This knowledge of the sun's circular motion is also preserved in a very ancient manuscript called the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a Vedic manuscript. It says, that sun passing through the north, through the south, or crossing the equator is known differently depending on its slowness, swiftness, or equality of movement, in its rising and setting or staying up in different positions. It is making long, short, or equally long days, while it as ordained moves through the different signs of the astrological zodiac. Canto 5, verse 21. For those questioning yourselves as to why this information even matters to the larger picture, and reasons of why we are here, who we are, and what this is all about, why should anybody spend any time examining these things in detail? Let me remind you that even Enoch, in the second line of the very first chapter of his testimony, said, from them I heard all things and understood what I saw, that which will not take place in this generation, but in a generation which is to succeed at a distant period, on account of the elect. It is my opinion that we are that elect, and that we are the fig tree generation as revealed by Christ in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. Certainly Enoch believes that what was being shown to him by the angel Uriel and the Word, Christ himself, in this book, and the revelations contained within, would be very important for the elect in what I believe Christ was alluding to again as the blooming of the fig tree, and are being the witnesses of the end-time generations. The question we must ask is, what about this book is so critical for understanding when it comes to those alive at these times? I personally believe that there are at least 3 very important reasons for why the Most High God preserved the Book of Enoch for these times, when the enemy obviously expended so much effort to extirpate these stories from the conscience of the world's people. These reasons are: Number 1. Because it explains the phenomena of the sons of God mating with the daughters of men in Genesis 6 in greater capacity than any other text available for scrutiny. Number 2. Because it explains the true nature of the cosmology, which when understood will give believers the knowledge necessary to combat and avoid getting caught up in the strong delusion and declaration that the ancient aliens are the creators of humanity. Number 3. It contains explanation of the calendar system, which correctly observed assists one in correctly determining not only the true Sabbath, but also the correct Levitical feasts and holy days. In the 6th chapter of Jubilees and also the book of Daniel, we are warned explicitly that Satan as the Antichrist would change the times and the seasons, and disrupting and usurping the true cosmology, calendar, Moedim, holy days, and Sabbath, would divorce the measurement of time from the movements and the phases of the moon. In Daniel it says, "And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times, and the dividing of time." In a book called Ezekiel the Tragedian, it says, "This month shall be the first month of your year, in which I'll lead you to another land, which to the Hebrew fathers I did swear, and say to all the peoples, in this month on full moon's eve, the paschal sacrifice to God present, and touch the doors with blood, which sign the fearsome angels shall pass by." And so we see that Passover occurs on the eve of full moon. Comprehending that Yahushua Christ, as the Passover lamb, fulfilled the feast of his Father in first coming, and being resurrected after the full moon Sabbath of unleavened bread, he fulfilled his promise to Adam when casting him forth from paradise, and as the high priest in the order of Melchizedek, on the day of first fruits, restored Adam and his righteous descendants to their first estate, and glorified them before sending the Holy Spirit on Shavuot, Pentecost, to anoint the apostles for the Great Commission to go forth and in pronouncement to the world to share the good news of salvation through him. Understanding this narrative, and that the spring and summer festivals have been completed, and that he will return in second advent on what will be the remaining fall feasts, one may be excited to know that in the legends of the patriarchs and the prophets, it is declared that he would exactly return on what is Yom Teruah, or what in ancient times was referred to.
What is most interesting about the time preceding Yom Teruah? The dark conjunctive moon was in ancient times referred to as that moment which no man knoweth the day or the hour. This reason is because the lunar conjunctive moon hides and then yields to what is the first appearance of the waxing crescent, which when seen by two witnesses after sunset, the Sanhedrin would commence the blowing of the shofars all across Israel, and the ecclesia would come running to the temple for celebration of a new moon convocation. With that in mind, consider the following. Now it was the first day of the 7th month, Tishri, the day on which at the close of the world's history, the Lord will come to judge the quick and the dead. That's from the legends of the patriarchs and the prophets. It is my belief that as the fig tree generation, we are living in those times which Luke chapter 21:28 says, "And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh." In my opinion, the only thing that precedes the return of the Messiah is the coming of the fake Antichrist, and this accompanies the strong delusion. Don't let yourself be caught up in the lie of which this video warns you deeply. Be blessed all.